Your grandmother suffered from systematic nutritional deprivation, untreated infections, and what appears to be intentional medical neglect, Dr. Reeves announced, holding up the autopsy report while Linda Hutchison, Grandma's caretaker, sat frozen with her $90,000 invoice still clutched in her manicured hands. The funeral home's conference room erupted as Linda jumped to her feet screaming about lawyers and defamation, but the coroner's next words stopped her cold. Mrs. Hutchison, I've already contacted the district attorney. This is now a homicide investigation. That's when I noticed the police officers who'd been quietly standing by the door move to block her exit. Linda's face went through a spectrum of emotions, indignation, rage, then settling on a calculated calm that chilled me more than her outburst. She smoothed her pristine white uniform, the same one she'd worn to Grandma's funeral yesterday like some twisted badge of honor, and sat back down with deliberate poise. This is clearly a misunderstanding, she said, voice steady as a news anchor. I have documentation for every hour, every medication, every meal. Eleanor was 93 years old with advanced dementia. Her death was expected. Expected? Dr. Reeves flipped through the report. Mrs. Martinez weighed 82 pounds at death. Her medical records from 2 years ago show she weighed 130. That's not age-related decline, Mrs. Hutchison. That's starvation. I felt my coffee cup shake in my hand. Grandma Eleanor had been a force, a woman who'd run her own restaurant for 40 years, who'd taught me to make tamales when I could barely reach the counter, who danced at my wedding just 3 years ago before the dementia took hold. The woman in that casket yesterday had looked nothing like her. She refused to eat, Linda said smoothly. It's all in my daily logs. I tried everything. Your logs, Detective Chin interrupted, speaking for the first time. Would those be the same logs that show you administering medication that was never prescribed? Or the ones documenting doctor visits that never happened? Linda's composure cracked slightly. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Chin continued. I'm stating facts. We've been investigating you for 6 months, Mrs. Hutchison. This isn't your first elderly client to die under suspicious circumstances. The room went silent. I stared at Linda, this woman I'd trusted with the most precious person in my life. She'd come highly recommended, with glowing references and a warm smile. She'd assured me she'd care for Grandma like family while I worked overseas, sending weekly updates and photos that always seemed to show Grandma sleeping. Julia, Linda turned to me, her voice taking on a pleading tone. You know how hard I worked. The overtime, the holidays, the difficult behaviors. Your grandmother was combative, delusional. She'd throw food, refuse medications. I documented everything for her safety and mine. Show me, I said quietly. What? Show me this documentation. Because I have 2 years of emails from you describing a quiet, compliant patient who slept most of the day. So which was it, Linda? Was she combative or catatonic? Linda reached for her leather portfolio, the same one she dramatically produced the invoice from yesterday. She pulled out a thick binder, labeled with Grandma's name in decorative script. Every day, she said, sliding it toward me. Every meal, every medication, every incident. I opened it to a random page. January 15th, the day I'd video called from Singapore. According to Linda's log, Grandma had been agitated and uncooperative all day, refusing meals and medication. But I'd spoken to her that evening. She'd been lucid, happy, telling me about the birds outside her window. Interesting, I said. On January 15th, you logged that she refused all meals. But I have a video call from 7 p.m. where she was eating soup and crackers. She even showed me her empty bowl. Linda's eye twitched. She must have eaten after I left. You billed for 24-hour care, Detective Chin noted. When exactly did you leave? Dr. Reeves cleared his throat. May I continue with the autopsy findings? Because the malnutrition is just the beginning. Linda's hand moved toward her purse, but an officer stepped closer. She froze, then folded her hands in her lap. Go ahead, Chin said. Eleanor Martinez had 4 untreated pressure sores, the worst category 4, meaning down to the bone. These take months of immobility to develop. She had a severe urinary tract infection that had spread to her kidneys. Her medication levels were inconsistent with prescribed doses, some too high, others completely absent from her system. The dementia made her non-compliant, Linda started. Stop. My voice came out harder than intended. Stop lying. I have the pharmacy records. You picked up her medications every month. If she wasn't taking them, where did they go? Linda's carefully constructed facade was crumbling. You don't understand the stress of caregiving. The thankless hours, the profit. Chin pulled out another file. Mrs. Hutchison, you've been billing Medicare, private insurance, and families simultaneously for the same services. Your reported income last year was $400,000, but you only declared $60,000 in taxes. Where did the rest go? I want a lawyer, Linda said. Probably wise, Chin agreed. Because we also found something interesting in your storage unit. 17 boxes of medications, all prescribed to deceased patients. Street value approximately $200,000. The pieces clicked into place. The constant sedation, the refused meals, the isolation. Linda hadn't been caring for Grandma. She'd been warehousing her, keeping her alive just enough to keep the checks coming while selling her medications and billing for services never provided. How many? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. How many others? Chun and Dr. Reeves exchanged glances. We've identified 12 suspicious deaths over the past 5 years. All elderly, all with dementia, all under Mrs. Hutchison's care. Your grandmother's case gave us the evidence we needed to connect them. You killed my grandmother for money? The words came out as a roar. I was on my feet, the conference table between us the only thing stopping me from reaching for Linda's throat. I provided care. Linda shouted back. Do you know what your precious grandmother was like? Crying for her dead husband all night, soiling herself, hitting me when I tried to change her. You dropped her in my lap and ran off to play executive in Singapore. Don't you dare judge me. I called every day. I hired you specifically so she could stay in her home. I paid you $5,000 a month. Pennies. Linda spat. Pennies for dealing with a woman who didn't even know her own name. I deserved every cent I took. The confession hung in the air. Chin nodded to the officers, who produced handcuffs. Linda Hutchison, you're under arrest for murder, elder abuse, fraud, and drug trafficking. You have the right to remain silent. As they cuffed her, Linda looked at me with pure hatred. She called for you every night. Where's Julia? When is Julia coming? I told her you were dead. It was the only way to shut her up. The cruelty of it knocked the breath from me. I sank into my chair as they led her out, her designer heels clicking against the funeral home's marble floor. Dr. Reeves placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry. No one should discover something like this about a loved one's death. She suffered, I said numbly. For 2 years she suffered, and I wasn't there. You couldn't have known, Chin said. Linda Hutchison was a professional. She had references, licenses, insurance bonds. She knew exactly how to appear legitimate while systematically destroying the people in her care. But the invoice, I pulled out the document Linda had presented yesterday with such confidence. $90,000 for additional services, itemized with overtime, holiday pay, hazard pay for violent episodes, even a cleaning fee for biohazard incidents. Chin took the invoice, scanning it. This matches her pattern. Bill the family while they're grieving, when they're most likely to pay without questioning. Several families paid before realizing something was wrong. Hazard pay, I repeated bitterly. She charged hazard pay for dealing with a 90-pound woman who could barely move. The real hazard was Linda Hutchison, Dr. Reeves said. Your grandmother fought to survive as long as she did. The evidence shows she tried to refuse the overmedication. There are finger marks on her arms consistent with forced injection sites. She fought back, Ms. Rodriguez. Even with dementia, she knew something was wrong. That broke me. I thought of Grandma, trapped in her own home with a monster in white, trying to resist with what little strength she had left. Calling for me while Linda told her I was dead. What happens now? I asked when I could speak again. We build the case, Chin said. With your grandmother's evidence and the other families coming forward, Linda Hutchison won't see freedom again. But I need you to go through everything, emails, texts, photos, bank records. Anything that shows discrepancies between what she reported and reality. I nodded. I have everything. Every email, every update, every video call. I saved it all because I swallowed hard. Because I was making a memory book for when I came home. To show Grandma all the things we'd talked about while I was gone. She knew you loved her, Dr. Reeves said gently. Despite what Linda said, somewhere in her heart, your grandmother knew you loved her. I spent the next 3 hours in that conference room, going through evidence with Detective Chin. The pattern was heartbreaking in its clarity. Linda's updates always came just after I'd deposited her monthly payment. The photos were carefully staged, Grandma always asleep or facing away from the camera. The medical updates were vague but frightening enough to discourage surprise visits. She isolated them, Chin explained. Convinced families that visits would be disruptive or confusing. Made herself the sole source of information. Classic abuse tactics. I should have come home. When? When she said your grandmother was stable. When she sent photos showing her peaceful and cared for. When doctors, who she was supposedly taking your grandmother to, reported no concerns. Chin shook his head. You trusted a licensed professional. That's not a crime. What Linda did, that's the crime. By the time we finished, the sun was setting. The funeral home director knocked quietly, reminding us they'd be closing soon. I gathered the documents, the photos, the memories of a grandmother I'd failed to protect. Ms. Rodriguez, Chin called as I reached the door. There's something else. We found a box of your grandmother's belongings in Linda's storage unit. Personal items she claimed were lost or thrown away by your grandmother. Would you like us to return them after they're processed as evidence? Yes, I said immediately. Yes, please. And, he hesitated. We found letters. Dozens of them addressed to you. Linda never mailed them. Your grandmother was writing to you until about 6 months ago. Would you want those? Letters. My grandmother had been writing to me, and Linda had stolen even that connection. Every single one. That night, I sat in Grandma's empty house, my house now, though I couldn't think of it that way. Everything was too clean, too sterile. Linda had erased all traces of the woman who'd lived here for 50 years, replacing family photos with generic art, traditional furniture with hospital-grade equipment. I found Grandma's recipe box hidden in the back of a closet, one of the few things Linda hadn't thrown away or sold. Inside, along with recipes for mole and tamales and wedding cookies, was a note in Grandma's shaky handwriting. For Julia, so you always remember the taste of home. The tears came then, floods of them. For the woman who'd raised me after my parents died. For the entrepreneur who'd built a business from nothing. For the grandmother who'd danced at my wedding and cried at my promotion and told me to chase my dreams even if they took me far away. For the woman who'd died alone, starved and neglected, calling for a granddaughter she'd been told was dead. The investigation would continue. Linda would face justice. Other families would find closure. But none of that would bring Grandma back or undo the suffering she'd endured. All I had left were recipes, stolen letters, and the promise that Linda Hutchison would pay for every single day she'd tortured the woman who'd taught me what love looked like. The invoice for $90,000 still lay on the kitchen table. I picked it up, studying Linda's neat handwriting, her carefully itemized cruelty. Then I lit the gas stove, the same one where Grandma had taught me to cook, and held the paper to the flame. As it burned, I made a promise. I'd use my tech connections, my resources, my anger to ensure no other family went through this. Background checks, hidden cameras, regular monitoring. Whatever it took to protect the vulnerable from the Linda Hutchisons of the world. The ashes of the invoice floated down like snow, settling on the kitchen floor. Tomorrow, I'd start cleaning, start reclaiming this space, start honoring Grandma's memory properly. But tonight, I just sat in her kitchen, reading her recipes and remembering the woman who deserved so much better than the ending she got.